welcome to the very last part of our 5-tip series. Our focus today is on the fashion industry. This is a billion-dollar industry worldwide and one that is constantly changing and evolving. In Trinidad and Tobago, we have great talent in the fashion industry, and so it is important to protect your work. There is no doubt where the word follow fashion came from, and this is something that plagues creatives in the fashion industry who may not have properly protected their work. This is part 10 of our 5-tip series where we shared 5 tips each week that were helpful for businesses, small to medium-sized entities, artists, innovators, designers, photographers, filmmakers, and essentially anyone who has an idea and wants to create and protect it. We share tips on how to level up and take your business or craft to the next stage, and most importantly, protect what you create. These tips were formulated from questions I am commonly asked and also from real-life client issues. If you missed the previous part, be sure to check it out on our YouTube channel, Teresa Kalu Law. Designers can protect their work using almost every type of intellectual property available. However, the unique nature of the fashion industry makes this challenging. Fashion is often seasonal and quickly changing. It is for this particular reason that designers find it hard or not cost-effective to protect their work. It is, however, important to protect what you create in this industry, as this is possibly one industry that is copied the most. Despite the ever-changing fashion industry, there are still many options available for designers to help safeguard their work. Here are my 5 tips to protect your work in the fashion industry. Tip number 1. Document your work. The good news for designers is that as soon as their original work is put to paper or screens in some cases, copyright is automatically attached to their work without having to do a single thing. A designer's original sketches and drawings are protected by copyright. Under this, therefore, they have exclusive rights to reproduce their work, adapt it to different forms, and distribute their work along with other rights. What is important, however, is to properly document everything you do. Many times, the hardest part of proving that someone stole your design is proving it was your design in the first place. This is why it is important for designers to keep records of all their sketches, save their process, date their design, and utilize the copyright notice on their work. This would be useful in instances where persons infringe on your work. There are other means of asserting your rights to the work and documenting it. You can use the poor man's copyright and mail the work to yourself, or you can even swear a statutory declaration to assert your ownership over the work. You can also deposit a copy of your work at the US Copyright Office, and recently the World Intellectual Property Organization introduced a new service called WIPO Proof, where you can deposit a copy of your work and it provides you with a date and a timestamp digital fingerprint for the file. Tip number 2. Utilize available IP systems. Almost every type of intellectual property subsists in the fashion industry. We spoke about copyright in tip number 1. You can also utilize trademarks to protect your brand's name or logo. You can use industrial design to protect designs that you create. You can protect your know-how, techniques, and customer or manufacturer lists as trade secrets. You can even protect some designs via patents. We now have wearable technology, and more you see technology making its way into the fashion industry. So where you have waterproof clothing or you have shoes with breathable technology, you can protect these technical effects by patents. What is important is to figure out what protection works best for you. If you're designing new clothing every month, it may not be effective to file for an industrial design because you only need protection for a short period of time. Protecting your brand's name as a trademark, however, would be useful to help prevent other traders from using your brand or anything confusingly similar to it. Where, however, you have created designs that have a longer shelf life, like a new design for a shoe perhaps, it may be useful to protect this using industrial design protection, as industrial designs can be a quick and arguably inexpensive way to get protection for your work. It doesn't have the extensive examination period and process that trademarks have, and so it can be a good and quick solution. Each type of intellectual property has its own procedures, timelines, costs, and length of protection, and so you should examine the different systems and see what works best for what you create. It is also important to note that you can most times use more than one type of intellectual property to protect your work. So you should determine the best combination to give your work the most protection. Tip number 3. Manage manufacturing. Many designers create their work but then rely on manufacturers to produce it. And a lot of the times, these manufacturers operate outside the jurisdiction. So the risk of your designs being copied, particularly in other jurisdictions, are therefore higher. It is important to firstly choose a reputable manufacturer. Do your due diligence. This is of course harder to do with companies in a different jurisdiction, but checking that country or state's company's registry can be helpful. This way, if there's a dispute, you know that they are a legitimately registered company that you can bring legal proceedings against. And honestly, even a general Google search can sometimes be very helpful in identifying manufacturers you should actually avoid. You need to carefully manage your dealings with manufacturers. In order for manufacturers to produce your designs, they may have to have access to your drawings, your sketches, your trademarks, your know-how, and your trade secrets. You therefore need to include specific confidentiality clauses barring them from revealing any confidential information, and also mandating them to properly protect this information. You need to be clear in the agreement as well as to who owns the intellectual property rights and state explicitly that you are not transferring any of your rights. Tip number 4. License responsibly. Licensing is a great way for designers to expand their operations internationally. They can grant permission to other companies to use their designs and trademarks and sell the designs in different jurisdictions. In these arrangements, you can expand your brand's presence and worth and collect royalties for your work without having to actually set up in another jurisdiction yourself. Co-branding is also an excellent avenue for brands to strengthen their brand value. Here, the designer can license the use of its designs for use with another brand. While licensing can be a great tool, it must be done responsibly to ensure that you protect your work. Firstly, the license should identify what intellectual property is owned by the designer and what works the designers have rights to. This would ensure that you maintain ownership and control over your work. It also needs to specify the type of permission being given and what works are allowed to be used by the other party. The most critical aspect to protect your work would be to implement clear and specific guidelines on how the work is to be manufactured and used. Quality control provisions are essential to maintaining your brand value and ensuring that the quality of your designs are maintained. This is equally important when co-branding, as you need to ensure the other company or brand does not do anything that could negatively affect your brand and your designs. Tip number 5. Protect against copycats and counterfeits. Two of the biggest issues that plague designers are copycats and counterfeits. When a designer becomes popular or where you outsource your manufacturing, you become susceptible to copycats and counterfeit products. With respect to copycats, they essentially use your designs and create something very similar, and then they are in direct competition with you. Where, however, you have properly documented your work or where you have properly protected your rights as discussed previously, you can bring an action against them for infringing on your rights. The idea behind intellectual property protection is that you have exclusive rights to your work, and persons therefore need permission to replicate your work. Many times, putting others on notice with your copyright and trademark symbols would actually deter them, or even explaining your rights to infringing parties can help to deter them from infringing. You can sometimes even benefit from it by offering a license to use it. Some persons may not realize that they are infringing on your rights or that what they are doing is wrong. In terms of counterfeiting, this one is a bit trickier to enforce. This requires you to get your local authorities involved and can be difficult in jurisdictions where intellectual property rights are not properly enforced. Counterfeits can significantly and negatively impact the value of your brand, and so you should put in measures to help protect against it. One way to do this is, as mentioned before, ensuring you secure your intellectual property protection and notify third parties of your rights. Another helpful measure is to utilize new technologies that make it harder for counterfeiters to copy your original labels and make it easier to identify counterfeits. It is also important to put measures in place to keep tight control over manufacturing and supply chains and try to manufacture or distribute your goods in countries that have proper infrastructure in place to protect your intellectual property rights. It is also helpful to educate your customers so that they know which items are authentic work and how to spot a counterfeit product. Even limiting who can distribute your work and sharing this with your customers can help to protect your brand's identity and educate customers so that they don't end up with counterfeit products. Those are our 5 tips today and our final 5 tips for this series. We hope that it was useful for our designers and all those in the fashion industry. We have really enjoyed sharing our best practice tips with you over the course of the last 10 weeks, and we hope that it has been helpful in some way for everyone that tuned in and can be helpful in the future. Although this is the end of our 5 tips series, we will be continuing with educational videos and articles, as well as with our online pro bono IP clinic that we host every month. So stay tuned, and until next time.